Hey everybody, you are tuning into Real People Real Estate, where we sit down with real people right here in Western Massachusetts doing awesome things in real estate. And I have a really special guest today. I think this is going to be a hot topic. So I'm here with Aimee, and Aimee has a tiny home. Are we calling it a tiny home?
Yes, for these purposes.
Okay, for this purpose. So we were just talking about how there's all these different definitions of tiny homes, but maybe even before we get there, how did you end up in the tiny home world?
Yeah, well, I've always wanted to sort of simplify my lifestyle.
Okay.
I grew up in Connecticut, but I moved down to North Carolina for work and kind of got stuck down there for like 14 years. And I wanted to come back up here. I was applying for jobs, and it's really hard to get a job in a different state when you're not living anywhere near it.
Yeah.
So I kept looking for jobs, and I kept saying, yeah, this is great, but we only need to hire local people. So I couldn't get a job, but then I couldn't live here without having a job.
Sure.
So
it's like a chicken before the egg situation.
So I thought, I'll get a tiny house on wheels. I'll buy the house here, drive it up there so I can kind of live here until I have a real job, and then I can actually be a resident. So in North Carolina, you buy a tiny house and they're like, great, park it somewhere and you're fine. But when I moved up here, I didn't realize that every state has different rules for that.
Oh, interesting.
And up here, it's not, so tiny houses on wheels aren't actually considered dwellings. Okay. Depending on what town you're in.
Yeah.
So all zoning is different.
Interesting.
And it has to be hooked up to, like it's on the wheels especially, it's to be hooked up to something that's permanent structure.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I kind of downsized, I used to work in corporate science, but I wasn't happy. I wanted to really do something that was more meaningful and more simple. Yeah. But those kind of jobs don't really pay a lot of money. So I couldn't really afford the lifestyle that I'd had. So I was like, this will be great because then I can really have that freedom of moving wherever I wanted to and not sort of be tied to, you need to get a fancy job so I could afford to live somewhere.
Right.
But what I found out was when you have a tiny house on wheels, you have to hook up to a structure.
Okay.
But, I know they have the new ADU rule.
Yes.
Or laws that, in theory,
Massachusetts specifically,
Yeah, allow you to have another structure. But that, people don't tell you is that requires a ton of permits and a ton of money and a lot of zone requirements.
Yeah.
And there has to be a house exists before you.
Okay.
On a piece of land that has to be zoned for another structure that has to be hooked up and can only be secondary. So you can't have a tiny house
without an existing.
So it can't be primary residence, it's got to be secondary resident.
Now in North Carolina though, where you started, it sounds like it was much more simple.
You can just, as long as there's a piece of land and hook up, they were like,
you can just go and park and that's it and you're, okay.
But here you have to get permits. And the other thing that I discovered, so I moved up here in September. So I have a friend who lives near Boston. So, we didn't know all these different stipulations and details. She was like, sure, stay at my house. So I hooked up with her. And then one of the neighbors was like, you can't do that, right? And I was like, no. So apparently in that part of the state, it's considered a house on wheels, considered an RV. So there's big rules for an RV.
So that's different.
But then I got a job out here. Yeah. And so I've been living out here and working out here. But I tried to figure out where I can move my house. I'm just renting a space now while I'm working during the week, and I go back to my tiny home during the weekends.
Okay.
Because I can't find a place or anyone will tell me where I can actually legally live here.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I looked in 3 or 4 different towns in Western Mass, and each one of them. So one of them, my house is considered an RV. One is considered a mobile home. Okay. One is considered an ADU, and one's considered a vehicle.
Wow.
But what I also found is it depends on where I park it. So if it's in the back and not seen, it's a mobile home. But if it's in the driveway and not lived in full time, then it's a vehicle.
Wow.
And so they haven't really figured out. It's kind of gray because it's kind of on as a vehicle, but kind of a dwelling.
Right.
And so everyone's trying to figure out what do we do with it? Fine. And then the other thing that was really surprising when I moved in, because my house was meant to be sort of off-grid, to be not only more sustainable, but also have more independence. Yeah. So it's all solar powered. It has a composting toilet. Everything is made of reclaimed lumber. And when I decorate inside, everything is reused materials. Yeah. And that's apparently also not allowed here, which is interesting.
Wow, you'd think
because
in Massachusetts, I would think that it would be more friendly to that.
Yeah, because all the talk about sustainable development and usable energy. Right. But I was told by one of the zoning people that you have to have it hooked up to some city utility.
Okay.
It's not allowed to be
Can't
fully
be off-grid.
Right.
Wow.
So they're all, but that's only in one town. The other towns didn't have that specific requirement.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, if you're getting a tiny house because you want independence, that was something I learned that was really frustrating, was that you are not allowed to be independent in a tiny house. You have to hook up to something.
Right.
And what I was told is it has to do something with the tax basis. So you can't really tax just this structure.
A house on
it's the land. And so you have to, then someone else told me, because like in the port, the reason why tiny houses are great is because they are affordable.
Right.
You know, they have a small footprint, they don't take a lot of resources.
Right.
And people who can't afford to live in large houses buy land
to the housing crisis.
You can have that, and you can share the utilities and you know, all of the resources that are really expensive, especially now.
Right.
But that's not allowed.
Yeah.
So I was told, in order to do that, you have to buy land, buy a structure,
Permanent structure,
and then bring your house there.
So they know how to
it's like
tax
defeating
it.
the entire purpose of having a tiny house.
So did you know any of this at all when you originally in North Carolina had this idea of, I'm going to buy a tiny house?
No,
Okay.
it did not occur to me that.
And now you've learned so much.
Yeah.
Now, what made you pick the features that you've mentioned that you picked? I heard you say freedom and, you know, wanting to use materials that were eco-friendly. How did you drill down on exactly what you wanted? And I would imagine there's a variety of different ways you could have done this.
Yeah, there's a lot of like manufactured houses, and they're kind of, you know, the same blueprint, just kind of like copied. And I looked at a lot of them, and they just didn't. They felt, you know, very kind of not like Lego houses.
Yeah, sure.
Like not homey, and just what I felt like it was not a place where I could call home.
Make it your own, sure.
And so, like, the actual structure I liked, because it was built by a local man in North Carolina who's more of an artisan. So I really, and his idea was also to be not only, you know, aesthetically pleasing, but also to be like ecologically sustainable.
Yeah.
And my background, I'm actually an ecologist, and so I'm really interested in living in the natural resources, and to really be aware of living deliberately and knowing that I'm, you know, what I'm taking into the environment. I always say I kind of want to live like in a Thoreau kind of cabin, you know, like really be aware of the resources. Yeah. So I was looking for something that was sustainable and that was responsibly built. Yeah. So that was why I was looking at this type of house. Okay. And I also, most of it was really that I was really tired of kind of being tied to the corporate structure, that I couldn't really live my values and what mattered to me because I was so concerned about making enough money to be able to survive and pay my rent, you know, and live in this sort of very, you know, this world that was so full of
it's like a rat race, they say, right?
Yeah, very materialistic. And, you know, I'm more interested in doing what matters and not, you know, what pays the bills as much. Yeah. And so this was my way of being able to not have to worry about being tied to a paycheck and really being able to have the freedom of being a type of job that I really believe in. Yeah. And being able to afford to live, you know, a healthy, happy life.
Yeah. And making the impact the way you want to.
Yeah.
Do you mind describing a little bit what your tiny home kind of looks like and maybe sort of take us on a visual tour? You mentioned some of the sustainable features, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it's on wheels, on a trailer. Okay. It's 8.5 feet wide and 28 feet long. Wow. I think there are 24 solar panels on top. So during the summertime, it's all solar powered. I don't have to do anything external. Yeah. There's a composting toilet. And I do right now hook up to city water. Okay. But it's also built, so it can be really versatile. So I can also hook up to either a well or do a cistern. Okay. And if you kind of walk in the front door, then there's like a little sort of sitting room. So I have my desk, sort of like a split it. Again, it's only like that whole area is like 8 by 8 feet.
Right. I'm envisioning, I mean, I don't know how long this is, a little wider, but
you have to be very deliberate of how you use your space. Yeah. So I have my desk kind of, and it's all, there are windows all around. So
wow, so lots of light.
Yeah. So there's also a lot of passive heat as well. Okay. It's really well insulated. So I don't use a lot of...
I was wondering about the heat source because you haven't mentioned
that. So I have a mini
split
for the winter. Okay. But once I heat it up, I don't really have to... And once I get the heat in there, then it stays. So I don't use a lot of energy. Wow. Yeah, so I have like my desk and like a little... I have a pop-stand chair, so it's like this sort of mini couch in the corner. And I love books. So I have bookshelves all around. Awesome. So there's a lot of vertical space that I use. And yeah, the key to tiny living is that you have to, there's a lot of storage. They have to like use every space.
Yeah.
So under the stairs, to go up to the loft is the bedroom. So underneath every stair, there are shelves. And so I put like sort of where I have all of my like linen closet and my shoes. And I have like my little like toolboxes and my little shed underneath the stairs. And there's a closet and also underneath where the bed is. And then the last part of the house, so there's a kitchen as well, which also sort of doubles as like a kind of a bar.
Okay, eating area.
And like stools, so that's sort of where I eat.
Yeah.
And it's gas. There's propane for there's like gas stove. So everything is full size too. There's a full refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
I'm a big baker, so it's important to me to have a functional kitchen.
Awesome. Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's a full shower. And there's actually laundry in the bathroom. So the back of it is just all of the kind of washing maintenance and everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of just sort of shelving that's all, every single space is a cupboard or a door, so you can put something in there. So I actually don't feel like I'm missing anything at all.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I have too much stuff.
Right.
And you say like, there's like
right
a
there.
vacuum, so everything's like I have, like it's right there.
Yeah. It's a different way of looking at abundance, right? I mean, you have this great space and you're utilizing every nook and cranny and making it your own and sustainable, which is huge.
Yeah.
And you decided, I'm assuming, to have it on wheels because you already knew at that point that you wanted to relocate to Massachusetts?
Yeah, that was why I did it, because I've been thinking about it for a long time, because I've always wanted and lived a very sort of simple lifestyle. I mean, I worked in corporate science, so I could have had, this really big house and fancy cars and all that, but that was never important to me.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to just live in a space that was just, just what I needed and not, I didn't want to take up any more space. But the reason why I got it on wheels was because I needed a way to, to get here.
Right.
And I couldn't buy or rent anything that was on a foundation.
Right.
Without having, especially now, you have to have like 3 times your, the rent's 3 times your salary, 3 times rent and all of that. And at the time, I didn't have a local job.
Right.
So it was really the way that I would have that freedom ability where I could move wherever I could find a job, and I could be able to, have that space and that time to figure out what I was going to do with my next steps.
Right.
So that was the idea, was keeping that flexibility. And actually at the time, I didn't really intend to have it like my forever home. It was just really a way to move and to, move to a different state.
Right.
But I really like it.
I was going to ask do you envision tiny home lifestyle as a place you'll stay?
Yes. But not in the way that I thought I would, because, realizing that I can't just live in that house. And I can't just park anywhere. Right. And I didn't realize also, the other thing I learned was that it's really expensive to move those.
Right.
People think you just can hook it up to a truck and move.
Back in,
But I mean, it's a house. It's not a trailer, it's not an RV, so it's really heavy.
Yeah.
And so and what I learned moving up here, actually the people who moved it up here from North Carolina dropped it 3 times. And didn't know, because they're like, oh, we're heavy haulage, we can do it. But they didn't understand the nuances of moving a house. Right. That like a full house.
Right.
And so
I hadn't thought of that. So you can't just hook it up to a truck and go.
No, because you also have to move. Most of the houses, because they're on a foundation or a trailer, and they're built to be sturdy enough to have a house and all the utilities.
Yeah.
They are too heavy to have. Like, you have to move it without the furniture. So you have to also get a moving truck to get everything out.
Yeah.
And then move it empty. So it's really complicated and it's expensive.
Yeah.
Because you have to pay for the truck. Right. And then the people are going to haul it and then find a place to go.
Right.
And most places don't allow you to stay for more than a couple of years. So you have to be constantly moving.
Okay. Because it's not considered a permanent structure.
And here I was told, and I've discovered that, people are like, well, just go to an RV park. Yeah. But those are seasonal.
Yeah.
So you can't have a permanent home.
Interesting.
Which is really frustrating.
Right. Do you know if there's any changes? I know there's some, I think, ballot initiatives, and I think Yes in My Backyard might be one of them. Where does that? Anything you think that's on the horizon that'll make tiny home living more friendly?
Yes, I think I'm actually part of a couple groups who are trying to advocate for that.
Okay.
because it's such a great way to live, and it would really help with the housing crisis.
Absolutely.
And I think it would give people freedom to be happier and to be able to do stuff that they love and not feel so stressed all the time about having to pay, for this lifestyle that people don't need or want. But yeah, there's several people. I think in the next couple of weeks they're having a couple votes. But if everyone could, write to their congresspeople and whoever represents them, to explain like why we really do need this and to really be more flexible and allow this type of living, because for some reason it's seen as sort of a competition. I think for. I know that there's definitely a need for, taxes and revenue.
Right.
But if people can move here and live here affordably, they can get jobs, and that's a different way of creating revenue. That I don't know if people have really thought about. The implications of making it so hard to live here and to find an alternative way of living. So within the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a vote. So
I would imagine that may include some changes to the minimum required lot sizes too. I think that's often a big focus point in because many of our towns, and understandably, people want to preserve the farmland style, but it's really tricky to try to have an affordable house when you have to maintain an acre and a half or whatever the size is. So that probably would be. I would think.
And it's a very small footprint. My house really, it takes up half of someone's driveway.
Right.
So it got to the only way that I could find a way to keep it and to live here was I did end up finding a half-acre plot of land in Irving, which I did end up buying.
Awesome.
And so I'm going to move that. I'm working on moving that house there.
And the zoning is such, knock on wood, that you're finding
that's what I'm still working on. But from what I was told,
that's great.
Depending again on how I classify it, it should be okay.
Right. What about for insurance purposes? Does that you've mentioned just the different classification and whether it's a trailer or a mobile home or how does that impact insuring a tiny home?
A lot.
A whole other
because
layer.
I need to decide if I'm going to say it's a vehicle, right? Then I go to the RMV. But if I decide it's going to be a house, then I have to go through house insurance. So but again, it really depends on where I end up putting it and if I can connect it to another house. So the land that I bought does have. This is the other thing I was saying, that it depends on the definition. So this house technically is a tiny house, but it's on a foundation. It's only 500 square feet, which is a tiny house. But it was built, it's called a Quonset hut. So it was built in the 40s before the tiny house thing was really a thing. So it's a different classification. So that was what is allowing me to move it there because it's not really a tiny house. So depending on how I situate my tiny house in relation to the bigger house. Because my house is only 240 square feet, my tiny house. So technically it's a big house. So I'm talking to zoning people now to figure out how to classify it and how to legally do that. So
you're learning so much, and thanks for sharing all of this too. If somebody was just thinking about, because in my day job helping people with mortgages, that certainly people get to a point oftentimes with this housing market where they're like, I just want a little piece of land and to put in a tiny house. And like you said, it's just not as simple as that. Where would you advise somebody starts if they're truly serious about tiny house living?
To definitely check with the zoning, like at your town, talk to the neighbors. What I discovered is that because it's such a gray area, it's hard. Even the zoning people don't really know. There's no definitive answer of yes or no, you can or cannot. What really matters is how the neighbors feel. So if they don't mind, then you can usually, at least for in the beginning, you can usually find a way, and they have variances and all those things. So if you can find a way that the neighbors don't get upset about it, and there's a variance that will allow you to keep it there, then it's fine. But you really need to do your research first
to find out what's
because there's
possible.
Some towns that are incredibly strict, and they just won't. They'll say absolutely not. Like one town said, if it's on wheels, no, I don't care what you do, just no. And then if you do, the other thing is that one of my ideas was I'd buy it on wheels and then take it off the wheels on the foundation.
Wondering that how
which you
difficult
can, technically
it is.
You can do. But because mine was built in North Carolina, it's not, I don't know if it's up to Massachusetts standards. So you have to
permanent structure.
Right. So then you also have to worry about building codes.
Right.
And health codes.
Right.
And so, they're all different in every town.
So you may very well be building an entirely new
I mean,
structure.
so when I thought about doing that, and I was talking to some of the building contractors, they said, probably would cost more to get it up to this standard than to buy another house.
Right.
Because you have to make sure that you have the right insulation ratings, and that it's on a foundation. It has to be a certain frost code.
Yeah.
So that's also something you just think about.
Yeah. It's not as simple as just finding the land and plunking down.
No, which I kind of was like in this romantic idea. So I'm just gonna find a quiet piece of woods and just mind my business, but that's not allowed.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I think that is often a desire that people have. And how has that changed your relationship with your work? And it sounds like that was just such a huge part of the impetus to have a better work and life relationship.
Yeah, no, it's been, it definitely has changed my life a lot, but it's made me really think about what's important to me. And it's been really sort of fascinating to realize how complicated it is, and that, we think that we're individuals and make our own choices, but we live in a society and a community, and so we're much more connected than we think we are. Which has been really, really interesting, and it's sort of eye-opening to see that, we do have to think about other people in the bigger context when we make decisions like that. That's a really
profound statement. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. You don't realize how everything's so interconnected.
Yeah. But I do appreciate that, even though it's challenging and I've learned a lot about politics, it has been nice because even though I'm still trying to figure out long-term how I can make this lifestyle happen, it has given me the freedom to take a much lower paying job, but one that I feel is a lot more rewarding.
Right. Yeah. So. You mentioned some groups and advocacy groups that you've been working with around this. Do you feel like you've found some good support systems? And if someone was interested in tiny home work or advocacy, is there anything you would point them to in that regard?
Honestly, the tiny house community, I just moved here.
Yeah.
I haven't found it that supportive, but partly because I don't think anybody really knows what's happening. So I think it's a lot of just frustration.
Well, there's opportunity then to build that group.
Yeah. So I do think that it is definitely something that is it's the beginning of a movement. I think that's important.
Yeah.
But I think the more people that are interested and that start talking to representatives. Actually, a couple weeks ago, I was at one of the No Kings things, and I met a bunch of politicians who are walking around, of course, doing politician things, and they were talking about housing and what they're doing, and it's well, actually,
right,
let's talk about this because it's something that is not really talked about very much, and people we have all of these in the ADU and all these things that we're moving forward.
Right.
And this is my major issue. And they said, let me tell you what's really like on the other side.
Yeah.
And they're really great. And no one knew what was really happening to the real people.
Right.
So, but they were great. And they gave me their contact information. They said, I want to know more from your perspective so we can take this, to representatives and we can really move this forward.
Yeah. I think we're lucky in this area. Our state reps really work hard.
Yeah.
Out in Western Mass to try to get us some pull in Boston. So,
there are a lot of Facebook groups. You just Google tiny house Facebook. There's a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But what I found the most effective is really going straight to representatives and saying I want to talk to you about how can we fix this, but in a really positive way, not complaining about it, but this is a solution.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand from the perspective of people who are trying to live here and who want to move to Massachusetts. How can we make this happen? And what can we do to work together?
Yeah.
And I found them really receptive and responsive and really positive. So
that's great.
That's what I would encourage people to do is to find your local representatives and really have a constructive conversation with them.
Absolutely. So. Well, thank you, Aimee, for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.
Any last pieces of tiny house fun facts or anything you think we should know? You've shared so much already. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's see, a fun fact. They're a good conversation piece.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And people are curious. So I have my house right now parked and my friend's in her driveway actually.
Okay.
And so it's very visible, and people always walk by, and I've met lots of people, and I actually made it into sort of community project because in the winter time, you have to put like a skirting on the bottom to help with insulation, and so things don't freeze.
Oh, sure.
But I was like, you know what? It was kind of boring, so I got neighborhood kids to help me decorate, so we put a mural on the bottom of it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so people always walk by, and they always ask me, "It's like I just want to see like what's going on in your house now," and they're just curious, and so it's a nice way to meet people.
Oh, that's great.
And the people want to understand it better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't be afraid to do it, but also know that it's going to be more complicated than you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aimee, so much, and thanks for sharing that story. That's really sweet, and all your stories. Really glad you could come on, and it's a great alternative way. I don't even want to say alternative because really a potential solution, like you said, to help people in housing. Appreciate your insight. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in today to Real People Real Estate. I hope you were as inspired by Aimee as I am. And if you want to be on the show, let us know. We're happy to have you, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks.